possibilities are all around us. Everywhere we look, we see opportunity. We see potential in unexpected places. And when we share our knowledge, vision, and connections, we turn great ideas into action. In communities all around the world that we call home. Like transforming an old bus to feed hungry children, or providing life-saving equipment to those who need it most. From fighting disease to rebuilding schools, together we can make real change happen. We're Rotary. We are people of action. Get involved today at Rotary.org.
As Rotary, we often ask ourselves, how do we grow, personally, professionally, and organizationally? The answer is simple. To grow Rotary, we need more Rotary clubs. Let's use Anytown as an example. Anytown is a city of 100,000 people and home to one proud Rotary club. But there are hundreds of other people of action, just like us, who are uniquely qualified to become Rotary members. They share the same drive and represent the values and fundamentals of a Rotary member. So why aren't they members? Well, the current club meets on Monday. There are leaders in Anytown who can't meet on a Monday. By excluding this segment, the potential members in Anytown has shrunk. Now consider, what if the meeting is at noon on Monday? There are people who can meet on Monday, but can't meet at noon. So now we have a smaller audience for Rotary in Anytown. Of the remaining group, some aren't interested in a club with a sit-down lunch and speakers. They are passionate about service, but aren't interested in a traditional club experience. And that is okay. The Rotary Club of Anytown isn't doing anything wrong. It just doesn't appeal to particular segments of the community. And if we're going to thrive for years to come, we must adapt and embrace change. In Anytown, we have an opportunity to expand because potential members are everywhere. More than half of the eligible people are prospective Rotary members, waiting to make a bigger impact in their community. But what Rotary Club exists for them? If Anytown creates new clubs at new times and new places, the hidden potential for Rotary will be revealed. As people of action, we must broaden our reach and provide opportunities to all leaders in the community. Together, all of us can grow Rotary.
I moved here and really didn't know anyone.
I wanted to get started on my career.
I felt like I needed to be more active and give back.
I wanted to be in a career that I loved. Always learning, always following my goals.
I knew I wanted to help people and create lasting change.
I was looking for a way to connect with new people and make friends. Something fun and social.
Something that makes me a better person.
Something meaningful.
I've grown to know my neighbors.
And work with them to improve our community.
I'm becoming the impactful leader I want to be.
And through it all, I've had fun and met some of the best people.
I found connections, solved problems, and made a difference.
I've built a network, a community.
We took action. We joined Rotaract.
When people ask us who we are, we tell them we're problem solvers, opportunity creators, and change makers. We are Rotary. Around the world, our network of 1.4 million neighbors, friends, and leaders volunteer their skills and resources to solve issues and address community needs. Take action with us. Find out more at rotary.org/action.
We are people of action.
And when there's a challenge to confront, people of action come together and make a plan.
Even as we continue to help address global challenges, we're facing one of our own. When Rotary surveyed people around the world, we found a big gap between who we are as an organization today and who we need and want to be.
Our foundation is strong, but Rotary is ready to show that we can grow and become even stronger.
So we established our new action plan as a roadmap for how we can think differently, be more inclusive, and become a stronger, more effective Rotary.
The plan has 4 priorities. We're going to increase our impact because now more than ever, the world needs innovative planning and proved solutions. We'll be more data-driven, not just serving communities and doing good works, but measuring what we do so we can scale up our successes. And share more compelling stories about the good we do.
We will expand our reach by welcoming new people into Rotary and finding new ways to connect with people who share our commitment to making our communities and ourselves better. We'll enhance participant engagement by making sure everyone who connects with us gets even more out of their experiences than they put in.
And we'll increase our ability to adapt, because staying ahead of change while staying true to who we are is exactly how we make sure we have the staying power it takes to lead a new century of change.
Rotary's action plan is ambitious, but we can do it.
If we work together on new ways to think, plan, and take action, we will bring our communities and our organization to new heights.
Our legacy is in the making. Ready to do your part?
Let's show the world what it means to be people of action.
For over 100 years, Rotary members have taken action when challenges arise. We know what people can do when they come together and put others before themselves.
The team lead said they will continue the campaign to fight against the coronavirus.
Local Rotary clubs deliver food and supplies to people in need.
Strangers become friends, helping hands multiply, and problems turn into solutions. We are Rotary. We are people of action. Learn more at rotary.org/action.
With over 1 million members, we know what people can do when they come together. We are Rotary. We are people of action. Find out more at rotary.org/action.
We all start somewhere. In a new home, a career, or a community. And more often than not, our goals are alike. Work hard. Try to make a difference. Meet new people. Make some friends along the way. And find something to better ourselves. Something meaningful. And while we may be new to these chapters of our lives, we still aim high. hoping to create lasting change for ourselves, the people we care for, and the places we call home. In the end, we all want to make an impact on the world. So why not do it together? That's why we take action. That's why we joined Rotaract.
Good evening and welcome everyone back to kick off day 2 of our Rotary District 5550 conference. My name is Mandy Kwasnika and I am the past president of the Rotary Club of Winnipeg Charleswood and co-host of the Talking Rotary podcast. I have had the privilege of working with the Rotary Club of Winnipeg West Conference Committee over the past few months to plan this great event, and I'm honored to be your MC for tonight. We have a large audience tonight of both Rotary members and invited guests, and of course, our great lineup of guest speakers. Before we get started though, I'm going to pass things over to our fearless leader and District Governor, Dan Sutton, who's going to share our Indigenous land acknowledgement. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Mandy. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples and their cultures and rights. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation peoples that call this land home. Back to you, Mandy.
Thank you so much, CG Dan. I thought I would take a few minutes first to share with you a little bit about Rotary. Many of you on tonight's call may be familiar with Rotary, but we do have guests also joining us who may have heard of Rotary, but are curious to know maybe a little bit more. So at Rotary, our mission is that we provide service to others, promote integrity, and advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through the fellowship of business professional and community leaders. It's a lot of great stuff, right? We are community builders. We collaborate with community leaders who want to get to work on projects that have a real lasting impact on people's lives. And probably the most biggest thing I could say of all is we are people of action. I can't speak enough about how Rotarians continue to amaze me in this aspect. I've never met more efficient and effective people in all of my life. Where there is a need, Rotary is quick to take informed and calculated action. It's one of my favorite characteristics of being a Rotarian. If you are interested in learning more about Rotary, I encourage you to check out our district website, rotary5550.org, and find a Rotary Club near you. We had a wonderful first day last week, getting inspired and challenged on how we can reduce child poverty. Today's focus, we are shifting to saving the environment for our youth. We have an exciting lineup of speakers tonight, followed by a showcase of Rotary clubs presenting on how their Rotary clubs are involved in saving the environment. But before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items for you. So please use the Q&A button, that's right on the bottom of your screen there, to ask any questions that you have for any of their guest speakers tonight. We'll be giving time throughout the evening to allow for our guest speakers to answer a few of your questions. So please feel free to ask any questions you have at any time. It's helpful if you place the name of the person you're directing the question to, followed by your question. If you'd like to share any comments on how you're enjoying tonight's conference, please share this by clicking the chat button also at the bottom of your screen. We'll be reading through these comments tonight as well, and I'd love to hear your feedback to share with the speakers. The conference, you'll notice, is more of a webinar type format. It is being recorded, and you'll notice that you're unable to see any of our other attendees, and all attendees are on mute and unable to share their video. As such, it's really important for me that you share those comments using that chat function so that we don't feel that we're alone and talking to a blank screen. This way I can share this feedback with you all, and you can also not feel like you're alone as well. And to our guest speakers tonight, to help keep our conference on time, we're asking that you keep your talk within the time allotted, and you'll see me appear on your screen. I'll pop up right beside you, and that'll be your 2-minute warning that you have 2 minutes remaining. And finally, we're doing a draw tonight for 3 football jerseys, but you need to stick around to the very end of the conference for your club to be entered into that draw. So please stay tuned for that. You know, attending conferences like these are a great way to get inspired. You learn so much from all of these great lineup of knowledgeable speakers that we have attending. But you know what matters most is what you do next. What happens when you shut down the computer tonight, that you wake up tomorrow morning? What are you going to do different than what you did today? I want to challenge all of you to write one action item down, something that you either want to continue to do or start to do based on what you've learned tonight. Notice I gave the option of continue to do. Many of you are doing amazing things already for the environment, and I can encourage you to continue to do those things. But for those of you who need a bit of an idea where to start, you are in the right place tonight. This is exactly the place to be. So let's get started on our first topic tonight. Our topic is Our Youth, Our Future. And we're excited to have Chloe Chappell be the first to share tonight. As a Rotary Peace Fellow, Chloe holds an MA in Peace, Security, and Development. Chloe has worked with NGOs in Canada, Southern Africa, Southeast, and Central Asia, focusing on supporting community-led initiatives for conflict prevention and resolution. To address the impact of climate change and conflict, Chloe is now completing the University of Edinburgh's MSc in Carbon Management. Please welcome Chloe Chappell. Do we have Chloe with us? There we go. Hi, Chloe.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, despite 2 years into a pandemic, unfortunately, my online skills are still not that great. I forgot about the bio part, so the beginning part of my speech is going to be a little rocky as I start over. I would like to start with just an acknowledgement of the beautiful film that started as we started this evening. It was a great reminder of the principles that the Rotary stands for. I personally have really enjoyed switching to virtual meetings overall, but I actually, when I think about meetings that I miss, it is the Rotary post-speech small talk. I'm not a big fan of public speaking. I know we don't like to hear that from a public speaker who's about to start their speech, but what I love about attending Rotary is first hearing the other talks about the projects you're working on, and then once I'm done my speech, some of the Q&A, but afterwards when you get off the stage, when people come up and they want to have an actual conversation, that is one of my favorite reasons to sign up for a Rotary talk. With that, I would say I first became familiar with the Rotary in 2014 at a very early morning workshop with David Dean. And he became my introduction to the Rotary and what I call sort of the embodiment of enthusiastic pragmatism. I was struck by just how excited he was about all of the topics and about Rotary. He invited me to come speak with you, and he made me feel so comfortable that I was willing to get over my fear of public speaking to come and share my story with you. When I was done speaking, he had many follow-up questions, both on the topic that I was speaking on and on me. And he asked me if I'd ever heard of the Rotary Peace Fellowship. And I'd heard a little bit about it. And he then encouraged me to apply. And I really didn't think I had what you were looking for. But again, that enthusiastic pragmatism, David was like, I think you do. I think even if you don't get it, I think the application process will be good for you. And that started me on a journey and to meeting many more Rotarians. And with that, then off to the University of Bradford, and then to working in peace building throughout Asia. And we're going to get to my favorite country or one of my favorite countries in just a moment. With that, I'd just like to touch on, I am currently back in Canada, mostly due to COVID. I'm doing a master's in climate change. And my dissertation, though, is actually focused on the effects of climate change and people experiencing homelessness in the prairies and the issues that will come with warmer, wetter weather and what that means for people who can't escape the wet. So with that, we're going to switch to my presentation. Is it not? Are we not? It's not going to share the screen. That's great. So that is the number one glitch that was not. Oh, thank you. Okay. So climate resilience and peace go hand in hand at the top of the world. Climate change, fragility, and conflict. We're just, so Jarell, are you in charge of skipping? Yeah?
Yep, just tell me when.
Okay, can you just skip this one? We're just gonna move past that one. Oh, okay, never mind. Can you go back? Oh, it's wrong, sorry. Glitches, of course, never want to appear. So when I start, oh, damn it. Okay. Okay, this is, so, all right, we're just gonna start over. Sorry. When I was asked to give my very first, thank you. When I was asked to give a Rotary presentation, one of the suggestions that I was told was to put photos of yourself in the slides to demonstrate that you were there and to then talk about it. I was putting up a photo at a presentation of me in the country, and afterwards the feedback I got was, why did you not post photos of you in that country? And it struck me that we often forget that the way that the media portrays a country is very lacking. And so there's a saying that war teaches us geography. However, the more time I have spent traveling, and especially working in conflict-affected countries, I realized that this is a rather optimistic view, and that in reality, we still don't truly understand these countries. So with that, I'm not sure who can use a chat. That's not how I was quite going to do it. Joel's going to go through several photos, really fairly quickly, just a couple seconds on each. I'll tell you when to stop. And I'd like everyone to think, what country do you think this is? It's not a full quiz, and it is a country you do see in the news rather regularly. So with that, you want to go to the next slide? And then next slide. Next slide. Next slide. If you can enter the chat and you want to make a guess, go ahead and try and guess what country you think this is. Next slide. And then next slide. Next, nice. You're very close, geographically speaking. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, yeah, this is my very first presentation I sent in. Sorry, next slide. Mongolia, so again, geographically close, but you're going the opposite direction. Okay, next slide. So this might help. Nepal, good guess. Again, we want a similar region, but we want to swing down. Next slide. Romania, too far over. So they're very popular for these flowers. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry, this was my draft. So this is a photo that you might have seen, or this area. There we go. I did work, yes. Okay, next slide. Okay, and keep going. And then, yeah. Okay, so this is Afghanistan. Yes, so 2 people guessed. So this is the photo that I put up of me in Afghanistan. And the feedback was, we didn't think that's what Afghanistan looked like. So a discussion that regularly comes up in development, humanitarian, and peace-building work is how do we depict people with dignity? It shouldn't be that hard. But the truth is that negative images raise more money, which in the short term helps more people. However, long term, the dehumanization grows, and it becomes more difficult to monitor in our work when we are trying to promote a project or just look professional, to take time to provide a more well-rounded picture. Did we forget to emphasize the hardworking Afghans who were making projects work, who were bringing about change in the face of adversity? So my speech and my PowerPoint aren't quite going to go together, but we'll just keep going. Can you next slide me? Okay, so this is Yasin. He is an Afghan, and I put him in this PowerPoint for 2 reasons. One, he took most of the photos that we are looking at today, and also because as I was collecting the photos for this presentation, and my end result was more narrowed down, one of the things that came up when this specific photo popped up was, that's not what I thought an Afghan looked like. They were also caught off guard by the fact that he's standing on a snow-capped mountain in Afghanistan. And it struck me that the humanity and dignity often lacks in both climate change and peace building projects. Too often we roll in, be it neighboring countries or the vast definition of an international community, and we come blazing in with what we think are the answers. I lost my presentation. Okay.
Jarrell's screen froze. He's coming back.
Okay.
Got to wing it.
That's okay. Story of my life. Okay, so Afghanistan is actually located in the Hindu Kush region, which spans across 8 countries, known as the third pole or top of the world. It is home to glaciers, which are the source of 10 large river basins, which provide water, ecosystem services, and direct source of livelihoods to 1.9 billion people. The Hindu Kush region exemplifies the complications of trying to address social, economic, and environmental sustainability. While the area has hydropower potential and access to modern electricity, more than 80% of the rural population rely on biomass fuels for cooking. The region is key for energy security. Climate change and human coping practices are expected to increase natural hazards drastically. I've personally seen that with affected for biomass and keeping homes warm, that people have had to cut down trees along the edges of the mountains, which has resulted in landslides and entire villages having to relocate out of safety reasons. Despite this, when we think of Afghanistan, we think of war, and typically all programs and projects focus on humanitarian needs of food, or of peace building, rather than a cohesive project that looks at development, peace, and the environment in all projects, always applied, and specifically with human dignity, and remembering that Afghans have been living in Afghanistan through all of this and continue to get up every day and persevere. In exploring Afghanistan, the sights and sounds will take your breath away and often leave tears in your eyes. However, if you're traveling in the country in the winter, you may find that your tears are from the very air itself. While Afghanistan does not conjure up the image of air pollution typically associated with industry and traffic, in fact, 2 Afghan cities are classified as 2 of the most polluted cities in the world. However, even rural areas and household air can be toxic. Sorry, I'm wondering if I should get that. City. Oh, I'll just say it to him. We're all in this together. The one that looks like a city. If the photo of the one that looks like a city, if you could go to that, that'd be great. In Afghanistan, as winter wears on, people made vulnerable by 40 years of conflict are forced to try and heat their homes however possible. Early in the winter, they burn wood, coal, and solid fuels or biomasses. But as the winter months wear on and temperatures dip well below freezing, they are forced to burn whatever they can find, including synthetics and garbage. This leads to the air in the home being drastically polluted, and the lives of those under the age of 5 and women, typically those who are around the hearth of the home or the cook stoves, lives drastically shortened. And in fact, in Afghanistan, air pollution takes twice as many lives as the war. Kabul, on either side of this photo, is going to be a picture of the city with water in the streets. Nope, other way. There we go. Okay. Kabul, like any capital city, has gone through a number of changes. However, the city was originally designed for around 7,000 people and now hosts, if you want, just show pretty pictures of Afghanistan. You just do that and I'll talk. So the city was originally designed for around 700,000 people, but now hosts around 4 to 6 million people, depending on if you're including the peri-urban areas. The pace of the growth was rapid and even earned a spot as the 5th fastest growing city in the world, with high-rise apartment blocks, fancy wedding halls, and shopping malls. The fast growth pushed prices and left a housing bubble. It also left the city unable to meet the needs with unpaved streets and sewers unable to handle runoff, and the lack of city services, leaving a massive plastic waste issue. So here you can see a photo of an old Soviet tank. That's fine. And then some livestock in the next photo. That's around Bandi Amir. That's an overgrazed field as farmers are forced to push their cattle further and further to try and find grassy spaces. You can just keep going. So those are Afghan snowshoes. I've chose that photo to represent local, and the fact that while those don't look like the snowshoes that we are traditionally used to, I am told on good authority that they work just as well. And I think that that is a great reminder of the fact that it is important to have conversations with local communities and to see what works for them before we bring in different ideas. You can keep going. There's Yasin's face again. There we go. Okay, you can stop here for a second. As part of the conversation of youth, in this photo, you see starting on the left, Mahmouda. Her family is originally from Kandahar. She was born and raised in Kabul. She was the program manager for a women's project. Next to her is Atik. Atik's family is from Panjshir, which was one of the areas in the 90s that was not taken over by the Taliban. But this time, unfortunately, the conflict continues to rage on quite significantly there as a stronghold of the resistance. In the middle is Wasila. She is from Badakhshan, in like the Wakhan corridor, which is the area that touches China. She is currently attending the University of Manchester, doing a master's in environmental studies. Next to her is Romin, who has a master's from Bradford University. And again, on the end is Yasin, who has a degree in computer science, who started with the organization in IT and then started teaching local NGOs how to better use their computers and run IT services, and then went into project management and is now the very first Afghan to be in charge of policy and partnership, typically a position held by internationals. You can go to the next slide. These are more pictures of me hanging out with Afghan coworkers, hanging out in the park, my surprise birthday party, and just, I wanted to show pictures of Afghans smiling and Afghans working hard, because I think that too often when we focus on Afghanistan, we forget to show those things. Next slide. I think that unfortunately, that while many, if not most Afghans look like this, that for some reason there is a disconnect. And I don't know why, but for some reason, it seems that when we only think of Afghans as looking like this family, I think that there is unfortunately a level of dignity that is removed. If you move to the next slide. And so I want to show this picture and ask why we don't get to see more photos such as this. In this photo, you see Doshti. He was he was the regional manager for the Takhar office, and his grandson. Doshti is standing there in traditional clothing while his grandson is in the more modern or Western clothing. And both are smiling and laughing and playing. And I think that unfortunately, in the depiction of Afghanistan, all too often, we forget about that. For anyone wondering, there was a different photo with his granddaughter also in it, but I chose this photo just because you can see the smiles better. Next slide. So in this photo, we'll start at the top right. That's a young Yasin, and that is him at about 13 when he was in high school. He skipped 3 grades in elementary. He actually does not brag about it as much as you would think he would. And he is standing in front of the White House. He is there on an international exchange program similar to ones that Rotary offers. Underneath Yasin is a very young me in Cambodia, working on a landmine project through a Canadian-funded internship exchange program. And to the left is Jawed Amin, one of the most amazing coworkers I have ever had the privilege of working with. He was originally a nurse at a Kandahar hospital, but unfortunately, in the surgery ward, unfortunately, one day there was too many patients and not enough medical staff, and he made the decision to assist a female patient that needed aid. And the Taliban found out, and he was no longer, the agreement made was that he would stop working at the hospital and that the hospital would not be targeted. So he gave up his passion for one patient, but a greater belief overall in dignity and access to rights and to healthcare. Sitting next to him is his daughter, Just for security's sake, because this is being recorded, I'm not, and although she's next to her dad in this photo, I'm not going to name her. She is brilliant, and she is supposed to be attending university this year on a full not university, sorry, she's in high school. She is supposed to be attending grade 8 this year on a full scholarship because last year she received the highest marks in her school. But under the Taliban's current rules, she is not allowed to attend school, despite the fact that the Taliban's children, specifically their daughters, are still attending school in Pakistan. Last slide. So, well, that was not exactly the speech that I had prepared for you, and I'm not 100% sure. I apologize that had the flow. Overall, how I would like to summarize this is that I think that the Rotary is on the right track, and I think that your principles and mission are what the world needs to take on climate change and peace building. There is no one silver bullet. There is no one focus. There is no way to fix this by only focusing on one issue. We must embrace that the world is complicated and that there are a number of issues going on. And I believe that education and listening to people who are facing the issues and treating everyone with dignity and providing opportunities to learn and have cultural experiences is how best to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Those insights that you had for us, they're real, like showing the true real Afghanistan. And I love that when our perspectives can totally change just by one person's experience. So thank you so much for sharing tonight. That was fantastic. And I'm sorry for the technical glitches that you experienced here.
Oh, that was all me. I'm so sorry. The tech team had worked so hard to make this smooth. I am so sorry to everyone.
No, all good, all good. So next up, we are going to hear from Jarrell Camayung, one of our very active and young Rotary members who is also pulling double duty tonight as guest speaker, and he's been very busy behind the scenes making this conference run as smoothly as possible. So Jarrell is a teacher and member of the Rotary Club of Winnipeg Satellite Club. He began working at the Rotary Youth Leadership Assembly Camp, also known as RYLA, as a counselor in 2012. And in 2018, he became the RYLA chair for the district. Outside of work and Rotary, he fills his time with choral music. So please welcome Jarrell Camayung.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Mandy. I am going to see if I can do this right. One, it's for me. Excuse me. Oh, this one. Perfect. Okay, so I am here to talk to the youth portion of today's event, which I think is very timely, seeing as May is Youth Service Month. So I am happy to be here talking to you today about RYLA, which is hopefully an initiative or program of our district that you are already familiar with. As Mandy mentioned earlier, RYLA stands for Rotary Youth Leadership Assembly, and I am the chair for RYLA of our district. Through the pandemic, we've had to make some adjustments and changes and additions to our RYLA programming, and because of that, we now have 3 kind of main programs that run under the RYLA flag, and I'm going to talk about hopefully all 3 of them today, focusing on our main flagship program, I guess you could call it, which is RYLA Camp. So RYLA, what is it? The in-person camp is a 6-day camp that focuses on leadership skill development, mental health promotion, provides team building opportunities for youth in our district, networking opportunities, and serves as an initial link to Rotary and the programs that it offers. Did I include? No, I did not. Okay. So RILA in-person camp is 1 week in the summer. We offer 1 week for our junior campers, which is youth aged 12 to 14, and then 1 week for our senior campers that are aged 15 to 17. When in person, camp takes place at the Anglican Memorial Camp in Clear Lake. However, we've gone online for the last couple of years. And so in 2021, we did RILA online, and we called it RILA Positive Change. So we had 14 sponsoring clubs with 26 participants from 3 provinces and 1 territory. So we had a youth from another district join our virtual RILA, which was really cool. We had 13 speakers and presenters. We went all out for this one, spanning 2 countries, most of them from Canada and 1 from England. And we used the Whova conference managing app. And so we had over 100 active discussion threads after day 2 of the conference. And we were able to engage these 26 participants throughout the month of August in 2021 online, which was really cool. So why support RILA? Campers who go through the RILA program, both those who participate online and in camp, always go home and want to do more, or go home with more leadership skills and more confidence. So we've had campers go back and start Interact clubs or join Interact clubs in their communities. We've had them go back and help plan school service projects. It spreads more awareness and more fundraising opportunities for Rotary projects. We've had campers go back to their school and raise money for a shelter box. We've had Interact clubs run programs for End Polio Now. We always plug and talk about different Rotary youth programs at camp. And so a lot of our campers end up applying for Rotary Youth Exchange. And former campers started the Rotex that we have in our district. They go home for more community involvement and end up coming home more confident in young leaders. There's many stories that you'll hear if you talk to former campers about how in 6 days they managed to go from not wanting to talk to anyone to crying when leaving on the bus. And those pictures are always kind of the best to share in presentations, but I didn't put any in. Well, I should have found some crying ones. Some notable RILA alumni. So this year, Divya was the MUNA president for MUNA this year, which was really cool. She's a former RILA camper. Sarah and Jackie, who are heavily involved in Rotex and Rotary Youth Exchange things, also former campers and camp counselors. Isabella is a co-founder of SAS Girls United, which is an organization that focuses on leadership and empowerment and confidence, building in Saskatchewan, all virtual. She's done an amazing job out there. Braden King, you might have heard, is a touring musician, came to camp for 4 years and always entertained us at the campfire, which was awesome. And one person I forgot to include I'm gonna forget her name. She was the camper that joined us from the district in Nunavut, and she is now a youth ambassador for World Wildlife Fund. So lots of things happening through RILA, and our youth are going out there and making some good changes. Just some information about camp for this year. It will again be in person and at Anglican Memorial Camp in Riding Mountain National Park. Junior week this year is August 1 to 6. And senior RILA this year is August 8 to 14th. All the information for this year's camp can be found on the district website. So if you go to rotary5550.org under youth and RILA, all the information will be there. Here are the handles for our other social media platforms where you can get more information. So on YouTube and Instagram, we're RILA5550, and on Facebook, it's RILA Rotary District 5550. On our YouTube page is a bunch of promotional material that you can use in your clubs and in your communities if you wanted to show kids what we do at camp. There's one video that's just testimonials of people that have gone to camp before and talking about how much they've enjoyed it and what they've done there. Just going to do a time check. Okay. So I'm going to quickly talk about the other 2 RILA programs. So RILA Day 7 is a follow-up to in-person camp. It's a one-day virtual, hopefully hybrid soon event. And it's just an extra opportunity for people who've gone to camp to catch up and share how they've used the skills they learned at camp, develop new skills, and another opportunity for networking. So in-person campers this year will have an opportunity 6 months after camp to kind of meet again and see how things are going. We held our first RILA Day 7 in 2019 with 25 participants, and the only feedback that we got was they needed more time to talk to each other. eRILA is the second RILA program to come out of the pandemic. It is a virtual online development session, encourages continued leadership and development, and it's open to youth across the district it's open to youth across the district, and we decided to extend the age range for eRILA. So it's actually 15 to 25, and that was to invite Rotaractors to come or any other youth that you may have liked to have sent to camp but didn't. So they've got an opportunity to come and participate in RILA programs as well. First eRILA was September and October of 2020, over 3 Saturdays, 30 participants, 3 really great keynote speakers that year. Personal and leadership development, club or group development, and project planning were the topics for that year. This year, we had planned to do eRILA, the Building Blocks of Leadership, for May 6th and 7th. We've postponed that to November 2022. Hopefully, it will pick up some steam after the first in-person camp after a couple of years. So that's why we pushed it back a little bit. Registration for that will open again in September. Here is all of our contacts again, and I just checked my email down there, rilachair5550@gmail.com. If you have any questions or want to help out, feel free to reach out. Thanks. I think I did it.
Jarrell, do you want to mention the June 5th?
Oh, yes, I can talk about that. So you should have received an email a couple of days ago saying that the camp is hoping to open up and clean up after 2 years of nobody going there. So there's probably lots of muck, lots of cobwebs, lots of things that need to be wiped down and refreshed. So I reached out to the church who runs the camp and asked when they were going up to open. They've had to postpone because of the extra rain and snow that we got. So the new date is June 5th. If anyone is available and willing to make the drive up to Clear Lake to help out, please get in touch with me and I will get you in touch with Reverend Kukuruds, who will tell us what she needs us to do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jarrell, for giving us that great refresher on RILA, and also for the great work that you're doing out with all the RILA programs that are going on, and also for helping with this great conference today. So thank you so much, Jarrell, for that. Just wanted to pause for a moment before we get to our main speaker, just to read through a few of the comments that are coming through the chat. First one was from David here. Thank you, Chloe, you're wonderful. And Sheila Reed says, thank you, Chloe, for sharing your experience and perspective. Love the photos and stories. And Fred's saying RILA is such an amazing program. Absolutely. And Rick Hubbs, it's a great start to life, putting students on the right road. And that is so true when it comes to RILA, and it's well worth it for your clubs to be sending in students into this program. A question for Chloe, if Chloe is still on the line here. It's from John Melnick. Why is Afghanistan so desired by other countries like Russia, USA, and France in the past?
Honestly, I think that's a really great question, and one that no one can really quite figure out. The quick, though not really that quick answer would be that Afghanistan has what conflict resolution studies calls the resource curse. It has many natural resources that, if you can figure out how to get them and get them to market, are quite profitable. Afghanistan also has an issue, though, in that it does not have its own easy access to export. It's not on a coast, and it has to get through neighboring countries to get anything anywhere. And unfortunately, the politics of all of its regional neighbors are quite intense, which makes export quite difficult, and affordable export quite difficult. So too often powerful other countries or corporations or just different types of armed groups have a tendency to think that they will be able to access that control more so than a government can, would be kind of my complicated short answer to that.
Well, I think you did a great job of answering that in a very short period of time, because I think that's a very loaded question.
Thank you.
So thanks so much, Chloe, again. Your talk was amazing. And again, I really appreciated you showing us a new perspective on Afghanistan. So thanks again for that. A reminder to everyone tonight that we will be drawing for those 3 football jerseys at the end of the conference tonight. So please be sure to stay right to the very end to ensure that your club is entered into that draw. And now we're going to move things over to our main speakers of the evening. Again, I want to remind everyone to please place your questions to our speakers using that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Or if you have a comment, again, please share using the chat button. I'd love to share your big aha moments that you're getting here, so please enter them using that chat button feature. And a reminder to our guest speakers, to help keep our conference on time, we're asking that you keep your talk within your time allotted. Again, you'll start to see me appear on your screen when you're at 2 minutes left of your time. We are privileged tonight to have our next speaker with us. He is an expert on the topic of climate. Perfect for tonight. Dr. Alex Crawford is a climate scientist at the Center for Earth Observation Science at the University of Manitoba. His primary research focus is Arctic storm systems, how they interact with sea ice, ocean, and land surfaces, and how these storms respond to long-term warming. Please welcome Dr. Alex Crawford. Welcome.
Thanks, Mandy. And first, we're going to make sure that I can share this all right. I have this on 2 desktops. So, Mandy, can you just confirm that you're seeing the whole slide and not the presenter view?
Yep, absolutely. Perfect.
Awesome. Then we'll get started. Yeah, thank you for having me. When I was first asked to give a talk here, the plan was to talk mostly about Hudson Bay, where the University of Manitoba is leading a collaborative effort across Canada to better monitor that place, in part because of the climate change that it's experienced. And I am going to get to that at the end, but we're going to take a really long detour to talk more about storms, because there have been some recent events in Manitoba that many of you probably are familiar with that I think are really good to talk about in the context of climate change. So let's get to that recent weather. I'm going to take you back a few weeks. Here is a picture from my back porch on Friday, April 22nd at 6 p.m. You can see that there is a retention pond just past that line of cottonwood trees. There's still some ice on top of it at this time, and there's still snow around, and part of the ground was still frozen at this time. You also might notice that the retention pond is starting to creep into my backyard. That's because we were having a lot of rain that day. And, you know, we went to bed that night knowing we were probably going to get more rain and the pond was probably going to get higher, and it was higher. This is Saturday at 9 a.m., April 23rd. And throughout the day, it kept coming up. That is Saturday at 7 p.m. So the next picture is inside my house. The sump pump was working. It was working, and it was a valiant effort, but eventually around 7, 8 o'clock p.m. is when it no longer could keep up with the rising water. And my wife and I had to supplement that with some vacuum cleaners and then dump it out the back and hope it gets to the retention pond. We only had a few inches of water in the house. That wasn't too bad. And actually that floor did a great job in the flood. We were very happy with it, but a lot of other people had worse experiences than we did. There were about 900 calls to 311 in Winnipeg about stuck cars. There were some streets and basements that had feet of water flooding them. Selkirk is one example of that. And there's a picture from some of the flooding they had. And as of Monday morning after the storm, there were 13,000 people without power still in Manitoba. And that's just Manitoba. There were some in the vicinity that also lost power. So this is what we call a flooding event. And yeah, let's dig into a little bit about like what's going to happen to this kind of thing as we keep warming up the world. And in order to understand is this sort of event going to become more common, less common, worse, not as bad? I think it's useful to understand a little bit about why it happened in the first place. So that's what this slide is all about. When the prairies experience heavy precipitation events like we did there, what causes them? And as a climate scientist, I like to say there's two things that you need to think about for Winnipeg. And Winnipeg is that green circle that's just to the upper right of that red L. You need a moisture source. Water has to come from somewhere. And then you need a transport mechanism. You need to bring the water to Winnipeg or to Manitoba. And the moisture source, well, Lake Winnipeg does not have enough water to give us that much rain. Lake Superior doesn't have enough water to give us that much rain. The evaporation has to happen over the ocean. That's the only place where there's enough water to give us that big of a storm. And now you look at Winnipeg and you're like, oh, well, it's like 1,000 kilometers or more from the ocean. So yeah, that's why we need a transport mechanism. But let's be a little bit more specific. The map that I'm showing you here is colored to indicate the humidity in the atmosphere, how much water is in the atmosphere. And the brown colors, like we see to the north and also to the west, are showing you places where it's really dry. There's almost no water in the atmosphere. So there's no way that's going to give you a heavy precipitation event. The teal color, that's where it's really, really wet. That's where there's lots of moisture in the atmosphere. And if you look at this map, this is pretty typical of any day that you might look at. There's more humidity in the tropics, and there's a lot less in the poles. And what that's telling us is that while warmer air holds more water, if you want to have a heavy precipitation event in Winnipeg or Regina or Western Ontario, you need to tap into warm, moist air. It has to come from the Gulf of Mexico, the tropical Atlantic, or maybe the Caribbean Sea. And it's usually the Gulf of Mexico. But now we have a new problem. Well, how do we get that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to Manitoba? And the answer for that is that red L sitting there. That red L is an L because it represents a low pressure center. More specifically, if you looked at weather reports, you may have heard this was a Colorado low. It's a storm. You can just call it a storm if you want, but more specifically, it's a Colorado low because it formed over Wyoming and then moved north and east over to the Dakotas. I know it's called a Colorado low, even though it came from Wyoming, but they call them all Colorado lows. I don't know why, but that's the story. And now once it's sitting over the Dakotas, that's where the one other element about these lows becomes really, really important. And that is the wind that goes around those lows, represented by the white arrows here, is always going to be counterclockwise. Always, always, always. So that means that if you're sitting to the east of that low pressure center, you're going to experience winds blowing from the south. And if the storm is strong enough, the conditions are right, you can tap into air all the way from the Gulf of Mexico. And that's what was happening on April 23rd, that Saturday. We were getting air all the way from the Gulf, and that was giving us our moisture. So the two things you need: moisture from a warm place, and then a transport mechanism. Colorado lows are often the ones that are giving it to us. And when they're really strong, we can be getting those extreme precipitation events. Now, just because you have precipitation doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have flooding, but there's two different ways that this can happen. And both of them were actually at play that weekend. First, you might get flooding because the water table rises. The water table is the word for just the top of the saturated zone in the ground. So you keep digging into the ground. Eventually, you're going to find that every little gap and hole and crack in between the soil and the rocks is filled with water. It's saturated. There's no more space. So that means that if you get a lot of precipitation or a lot of snowmelt even happening, then eventually that water table is going to rise, and it's going to keep getting higher and higher and higher. And if you're living next to a pond or river, you might see that that pond or river starts to rise up and come toward your basement. And if you live near a marsh or a wetland, or if you live just on a floodplain, to be honest, then that water may intersect your basement and start flooding it. And in April of 2022, we had a pretty wet month. You might not remember, but there was a blizzard exactly 1 week before this big rain event. And in fact, if you go back all the way to the 1800s, because we have data in Winnipeg from the 1800s, we can say that April of 2022 was the second highest precipitation we experienced. So when you have that much precipitation over a long time, the water table is going to get high, and that can lead to flooding. But there's another reason why we can get flooding. You might just have really heavy precipitation. And this can happen in summer, even when there's no snow to melt. If you have rain that's falling really, really hard, really, really fast, it can overwhelm the soil's ability to take that water in. When water goes into the ground, we call it infiltration. So in this little animation, you're going to see there's a rainfall rate of 25 millimeters per hour. But then there's this infiltration rate of only 15 millimeters per hour. The soil can only take up some of the rain that's falling. Anything that's left over is going to run off on the surface. That's overland flooding. And in the news reports, that's actually what I heard more about. And if you're thinking about flooding the roads, for instance, that's more overland flooding probably than the rising water table. I put the rising water table first because that's what flooded my basement. But anyway, this happens for two reasons. One, really, really heavy precipitation, and we had that. But also, if the ground is very bad at taking in the water. So that would mean that the ground is covered with something like concrete, or the ground is frozen. Either of those two things, really impermeable or really frozen, can lead to more overland flooding. And it actually, in this case, there were some places that still had some frozen ground. The temperatures were only just above freezing for a lot of places. And if you look at that weekend just alone, never mind all of April, that weekend alone was the third highest 3-day precipitation total that Winnipeg's ever seen in April. And April is an important month to think about because that's when it's warm enough for there to be rain, but it's also cold enough there's still likely to be snow on the ground. So you're adding the snow melt to whatever your precipitation is. 1896, by the way, is the record. And looking into newspaper articles, it flooded a lot then too. Okay, so what does climate change mean for all of this? Is climate change going to make our extreme precipitation events more common, less common, worse, better? You want it to be better, but you know it's not because it's climate change. I'm going to be a downer about this. Yeah, it's going to be worse. So if you look at any simulation of climate models to project into the future, and you have a simulation that involves more carbon dioxide emissions, that involves continued warming, the wettest days of the year get wetter. That's what this graph is showing us. And so what you're asking making this graph is how much precipitation fell on the wettest day of the year. The wettest day of the year in the prairies is almost always in summer. It can be in spring or fall, but it's almost always in summer. So it's rain, it's not snow. And that black line that you're seeing is the historical record. And the higher it gets on the y-axis, the wetter the wettest day of the year. And those units aren't in like millimeters or anything because Winnipeg or Saskatoon or Thunder Bay will have a different value for what counts as extreme. So it's just a relative index there. The three colors that you're seeing, yellow, red, and blue, are three different climate models. And so we can see that all the climate models agree with each other. If we have a strong emissions scenario, which means we fail to meet our Paris Agreement targets, then we're going to see a substantial increase in how wet the wettest day of the year can be. Now, you also can see there's some shading behind all of that. There's like some error in here, and that's because there's a lot of year-to-year variability in just how bad the worst is. But on average, overall, we can expect that the worst events are going to be worse than they used to be. The weird thing is that if you take the summer overall, and you just say how much precipitation fell during the entire summer, in these high emission scenarios, global warming actually leads to a small decrease in our precipitation. And it's not just in Manitoba or Saskatchewan, it's actually British Columbia, Ontario, anywhere in that southern tier of Canada. It's likely to experience less overall precipitation. And so now you may be saying, wait, Alex, you're contradicting yourself. You just told me that the precipitation events are going to be worse. Well, I said the most extreme precipitation events will be worse, but there's a difference between extreme precipitation and overall precipitation. So the first mechanism here is warmer air holds more water. I said this before. And so if warmer air holds more water and the air is warmer on average, well, that means it's possible to have heavier precipitation than it used to be. And that's in all seasons, not just summer, but I'm focusing on summer for this example. There is something else going on though. So here's a map that's showing some research that's brand new, actually, from what I've been working on at the University of Manitoba. And what it's showing us is if we warm up the world, so global warming, not just Manitoba, global warming, can we expect more stormy days or fewer stormy days? The red is showing you places that have more storms as you warm things up. The blue is showing you places where you have fewer storms. And overall in the Northern Hemisphere, and in Canada in particular, it's fewer storms. So that means if there's fewer storms in the future, there's fewer days with precipitation. It's just that when we do get precipitation, the maximum possible is higher than it used to be. This is really bad because what it means is we're actually a little more prone to that overland flooding, but we're also more prone to droughts because there's bigger gaps between our precipitation events. And so it's just kind of like getting the worst of both worlds. Now, I did promise I was going to mention what we're doing over in Hudson Bay because Manitoba, despite popular belief, is not landlocked. It actually has a deep water port, the only one on Hudson Bay. And as the world warms and as Canada warms, the sea ice in Hudson Bay and Hudson Strait is declining. There's actually more and more opportunity for ships to be going in and out. And because of that, there already is more activity in Hudson Bay for transportation, shipping, resource extraction. And that comes with, risks both to the environment and the people who live there, but also for the activities that are occurring. Our emergency response is not quite as good up in Hudson Bay as it is in other places. And there's a real need to better understand how storms interact with the activities and the sea ice that is in Hudson Bay. We have a much better handle on the southern tier of Canada than the northern tier. So one of the things that the University of Manitoba is leading is a $44 million project that is adding large networking abilities in Hudson Bay. And that is something that over the next few decades, we're going to get a lot of new data about. And my role in all of that is going to be looking at the storm systems and how they're interacting with the activities up there. And so with all of that, I'd like to thank you for having me here today. And hopefully that's not too doom and gloom. I did say those are high emission scenarios, which means they are avoidable. Those aren't necessarily the worst case scenario, but they're a bad scenario. And if we get our act together, we actually can avoid the worst of what I was just talking about.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Crawford, for sharing that with us. I think that's the best explanation I've ever seen on understanding how flooding happens, which, here in Manitoba, we know all too well about flooding. I've had that flooded basement myself, so those images you brought up look very familiar. And I think we all know well about sandbagging as well. I had to actually sandbag my cottage years ago when we had that flood on Lake Manitoba, although that was a little bit of a man-made problem. But you touched on so many great things there that are going to kind of challenge us in our way we're thinking and maybe how we're watching that news forecast next time too.
Yeah.
So I don't have any questions coming in for you yet, but please hang on the line because we still may have some questions come in here as we go along. We are going to keep things rolling though, as we are running a little bit behind schedule. And we are very lucky tonight to not have just one guest from the Prairie Climate Center, but two. Our next speakers are also experts in research of our topic of the environment. Matthew Loxley is a research associate at the Prairie Climate Center. He has a Bachelor of Science in Renewable Resource Management from McGill University and a Master of Environmental Science in Climate Change Impact Assessment from the University of Toronto. His work at the Prairie Climate Center revolves around climate model data and climate change adaptation. Isabella Roback is a senior research assistant at the Prairie Climate Center. She graduated from the University of Winnipeg with a Bachelor of Science in Geography. At the Prairie Climate Center, her work is focused on the health impacts of climate change, as well as educating youth on climate change. So please welcome Isabella Roback and Matthew Loxley. Welcome.
Hi, unfortunately, Matt was not able to join us today.
Oh, okay.
So it'll just be me.
Alrighty.
That's
Well,
okay.
welcome, Isabella.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, our presentation was pre-recorded, so I think that'll be played through Jarell, I believe, but if not, I can attempt it on my end. Awesome, thank you.
Thanks for having us this evening. My name is Matthew Loxley.
And I'm Isabella Roback.
And we're researchers at the Prairie Climate Center. Today we'll be presenting on the Climate Atlas of Canada, a tool for communicating climate change. Our presentation will have a bit of context about climate change in Canada and the Prairie Climate Center, followed by a brief description of what the Climate Atlas is and what sorts of content you can find on the site, and then followed up at the end how the Climate Atlas is used in planning and in other areas.
So the Prairie Climate Center is located at the University of Winnipeg in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So we acknowledge that the University of Winnipeg is located on ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory. These lands are the heartland of the Métis people, and we acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. So our goal at the Prairie Climate Center is to encourage and inspire citizens to participate in climate action and further understanding of climate change. We support communities in making meaningful adaptation and mitigation decisions to support and protect their citizens. And we want to help Canadians move from risk to resilience. So we're a group of meaning makers, researchers, and communicators, and we strive to make climate change meaningful and relevant to all Canadians of all walks of life. We use an evidence-based perspective to communicate the science, impacts, and the risks associated with climate change. And we specialize in making various forms of content for the public to engage with. So this includes maps, documentary videos, research reports, and plain language, training, writing, and outreach. So to put a face to our center, this is our team here at the Prairie Climate Center. This is our group of map makers, researchers, filmmakers, and data specialists, and more. And we work together with outreach knowledge and experiences to bring this content and information to life for Canadians. So while we know climate change is happening around the globe and we see global annual temperatures rising, we focus on climate change in a Canadian context. So here in Canada, warming is 2 times quicker than the rest of the world, and the North is experiencing 3 times the warming of the rest of the world. And so this country is experiencing really big changes. And while it may not seem like it after the winter we just had, we are in fact losing our cold winters as they become warmer and shorter. So this may not seem like a bad thing for some of us, but it has significant impacts on northern communities. It also means that our summers are getting longer and hotter, and what we normally consider our usual climates are not happening anymore. So for the Canadian Prairie specifically, this region is anticipated to become a climate change hotspot. Last year, we saw a really dry year with droughts across the prairies, along with extreme temperatures that were breaking provincial records, as this heat dome brought these long heat waves that didn't give us much of a break, and they put vulnerable populations at risk of illness and death. This especially had, and will continue to have, major impacts on farmers in the prairies who battle this changing climate and deal with these extremes and constantly face uncertainty on whether or not they can depend on their livelihoods. And so it's also impacting all Canadians, their homes, livelihoods, and health as these extremes are increasing in their everyday lives. So we've seen more large forest fires in Canada, and these not only threaten the homes and safety of those who live close to these fires, but there's health concerns that are seen nationwide as high levels of smoke in the air cause air quality advisories that are put in place to attempt to protect the public. Here in Manitoba, we have an unusually wet season that's caused significant flooding in the province, and Manitobans are seeing damages to their homes and communities while water is continuing to rise. And so these are lived experiences of climate change already happening, and we know that climate change is going to continue to impact Canadians as more and more are exposed to these risks. So there's a need for more accessible information around climate change that can inform Canadians on these impacts and experiences that are already happening in the country. There's also a need for providing insight into solutions that allow for Canadians to adapt to climate change, with the ultimate goal of mitigating it for future generations.
So one of the tools that we developed to help address this issue was the Climate Atlas of Canada. It is an online tool that combines climate science, mapping, climate data, and storytelling all in one place to make climate change more relatable and approachable for people living in Canada. The creation of the Climate Atlas was made possible through the funding and support of a number of different organizations, including the University of Winnipeg, where the Prairie Climate Center is located, and a number of different government bodies. We are also part of a network of climate organizations and data portals in Canada, including the federal portal, climatedata.ca. Together, we work to ensure that you have the most up-to-date data and that there is quality and consistency across all the portals. The Atlas itself uses data from 24 different climate models and 2 carbon emission scenarios that has been downscaled to capture the local geographies of Canada. The data itself was obtained from the Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium, which is a research center in Victoria, BC. The data consists of modeled daily temperature and precipitation data for almost 150 years, from 1950 to 2095, and comes at a 10 kilometer by 10 kilometer grid resolution that covers all of Canada. So we're talking trillions and trillions of numbers in this data set. So what we've done is we've taken this data, we've processed it, analyzed it, summarized it, and turned it into something that's more digestible in the form of interactive maps and graphs that you can view on the website. So that general temperature and precipitation data from those 24 climate models has been taken, and using programming scripts, we've turned them into different climate variables, each expressing a different aspect of the climate that might be useful or interesting. There are variables related to heat and cold, variables related to agriculture and precipitation, as well as standard, minimum, maximum, and mean temperature variables that can be viewed from an annual, seasonal, or monthly perspective. Altogether, there are over 50 different variables and over 250 different map layers that you can explore on the site. The maps provide a national and regional perspective, but there's also local data that covers all of Canada, including over 2,000 towns, cities, and regions. In this way, the Atlas is a useful tool for visualizing what climate change means for Canada at many different levels, and as a result has been useful for areas such as education and planning. But beyond the data and the maps, the Atlas also provides a number of other different types of content, such as easy to understand explanations of climate science, special topics and plain language articles about key areas such as cities, agriculture, health, and forests, and how they relate to climate change. In addition, we also have climate summaries and downloadable reports for a number of different locations across Canada. And finally, we have an inventory of short documentaries that tell stories about climate change from the local perspective, where we've interviewed people from across Canada and asked them about how climate change is impacting them and how they're dealing with those impacts. It's really designed to have a look at climate change and the positive things that are happening. We've also recently added a number of different types of content to our site related to Indigenous knowledges, which includes co-generated articles, videos, and interviews focusing on First Nations, Métis, and Inuit knowledges and climate change. In addition, we have community-level data for over 600 First Nations communities and Inuit communities that we've added to our map, providing access to community-specific data that can be used to assist with planning. We've also added Métis project icons on the map, which highlight important Métis-led projects across the Métis homeland. One of the ways that the Atlas has been used is for applied climate change adaptation planning. For example, in 2018, our team at the Prairie Climate Center supported the city of Selkirk in the generation of their climate change adaptation strategy. So together we went through a risk assessment process where we identified potential impacts of climate change, evaluated the risks associated with those impacts, and prioritized them in order for the city to develop a list of adaptation strategies. In general, we took the climate data from the Climate Atlas, organized it into a seasonal perspective that was useful for them in their business planning continuity.
So one of the topics that we have on the Climate Atlas of Canada is health. So we're not medical experts ourselves, but our outreach to medical specialists and local expertise allows us to fill in these gaps and provide credible information on these topics to the public. So we know Canadians are facing health risks associated with climate change, and we want to inform them about these impacts, such as who these populations are that have a higher risk, how they can prevent or cope with these illnesses. And so the 4 topics which we've categorized all our content into are mental health, heat illness, air quality illness, and infectious diseases. So these topics have information in the forms of videos, articles, and reports. So these are 2 examples from our infectious disease topic. So the first is looking at mosquito-borne diseases and climate change. And we combine science and storytelling together into these pieces. We talked to specialists, Victoria, who's a senior scientist at the Public Health Agency of Canada, Richard, who is a prevention medicine specialist, and they were able to tell us more about the scientific background of West Nile virus in Canada and how climate change is going to impact it. We also talked to Chris, who's an everyday citizen who contracted West Nile virus and was able to talk to us about his experiences with this illness. The second piece on the right here, this content was looking at waterborne diseases and climate change. So we focused on the risks from harmful algal blooms, which we're familiar with here near Lake Winnipeg. And so we spoke with Becky, who grew up in an Indigenous community along Lake Winnipeg, and she's also has a background in marine geophysics. We talked to Ian, he's from the School of Occupational Health, and provided knowledge on the illness side of waterborne diseases. And Chelsea is from Lake Winnipeg Foundation, so she talked about her knowledge on the watershed and what these impacts are on the lake that are causing these blooms. So these are just a few examples of our outreach and engagement efforts. Like Matt said, we work with supporting community adaptation and mitigation strategies. We bring various forms of knowledge together to create credible sources of information through citizen stories, scientist knowledge, and local expertise. But it goes far beyond just creating content for the public. So we work with engaging with the public to understand their perspectives on climate change through national surveys to understand perceptions on climate change and health, group studies, and working in classrooms, doing classroom workshops with students to understand their perceptions, to educate them on what's happening, and to inspire them to make their own changes for the future as well. But this work and our research at the Prairie Climate Center is overall to make Canadians more resilient against climate change. And this is both for now and our future generations. So thank you for listening to our presentation today. And that was unfortunately, we had to pre-record it since we weren't able to present it together today. But thank you again for having us. And so I'm eager to answer questions. Unfortunately, Matt is more on the data side of our work here at the Prairie Climate Center. So if anyone has any data related questions, unfortunately, I may not be the best for that.
All good. I appreciate the pre-recording. It actually helps us too on the technical side of things. It helps make things run a lot smoother. So thank you so much for that. It all works out great. And thanks again for sharing tonight. I'm definitely going to be checking out that website about the climate atlas and that you've introduced to us. I think it sounds incredible how we're being given access to this very valuable data just to the general public. And I think it's great how you've tied in that data and how it affects the direct effects to the overall health. Like, we haven't really heard too much about those two topics being tied together. So I think that's very interesting, what you've brought to us tonight and given us some good perspective on things. So thanks again. And I hope you can stick around for a bit, because I am going to just look over at my other screen here and take a look at some of the questions and comments coming in. So we'll see here. So Sheila says, when the Trans-Canada Highway is closed due to the overland flooding, we are in jeopardy of much higher problems. And yes, couldn't agree with you more, Sheila. Flooding has incredible negative aspects to so many things. Excellent presentations tonight. That's from David Newman. And we do have a question from Alan Moulin Brandon. Do you work with agricultural research scientists on adaptation to climate change?
Yes, actually, we have done work with farmers. Again, yeah, to move people from risk to resilience, right? And farmers are, of course, facing those biggest impacts of climate change. And so what does that mean for agriculture in Canada? Probably some big changes to be able to adapt to that. So yeah, they are definitely an audience that we try to cater to as well, to benefit them in the best way. I wasn't a part of that work, but I know that that is available on the Atlas. I think we actually have an agriculture section altogether. So I encourage you to check that out.
Great. And this one comes from Sandy Watson. Can we get the last screen with emails again? And do these speakers speak at any of the Rotary clubs? You know what, Sandy, we'll send that information out to you directly. And possibly all of the, I don't know, is it possible, Jarrell, that we can send a recap of the contacts after this conference to all of the attendees? Is that possible?
You know, if people want the whole thing is being recorded, it'll be available on the district website.
Okay, perfect.
Really difficult to go back through for all of that.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And from David, this is for Isabella. Does being immersed in the research numb you to the real effects day to day? That's an interesting question.
I wouldn't say it numbs you. It's definitely a hard topic to pursue kind of in your career and to be working with it every day and kind of this information. I do a lot looking into the health effects of climate change. And so I'm obviously very privileged to have, air conditioning in my home, and I'm not in one of those populations at risk. So it kind of motivates me more to protect those more vulnerable populations and to kind of get the word out to make people care about other people within their community. Mm-hmm. We do have a very strong network here at the Parade Climate Center, and so we work really hard to keep each other encouraged and whatnot. But unfortunately, I haven't. It's hard to desensitize from these topics sometimes. But
yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for that response. I've noticed a couple of questions have come in for Dr. Crawford, and he's responded directly to these individuals. But Dr. Crawford, I wonder if you could just share with everyone, because they don't see, all of our attendees don't see the Q&As coming in. Would you mind just taking that one question of what do we need to do to get our act together and prevent the big events? Do you want to share a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is a huge question. I'm a physical scientist, so I try to leave this mostly to political scientists and economists as an expert. Now, I can speak as an informed citizen of the world on this, where you hear a lot about technological improvements, so green energy, that sort of thing. You hear a lot about your carbon footprint or personal decisions you can make. The number one biggest decision you can make is don't have kids, right? That's a horrible thing to tell people. So the second biggest thing is never fly. And another really big thing you can do is don't eat meat. Like those are big things you can do. Okay, fine, but those are insufficient. They don't work. Governmentality is the fancy word for this, or basically making it so that individuals have to make their own choices to fix all of the world's problems. That doesn't work. We've tried this since Reagan. It doesn't work. So what do we need to do? We need to change the systems. What are the systems that got us here? What are the systems that led to things like global warming? They need to be changed. And so number one thing I would say is, well, instead of trying to maximize wealth, try to maximize welfare. There's a lot that's encompassed in that. And the second thing is education for women in the world is a huge thing. That's a big topic that other people can speak to better than I can, but there's a lot of ways that can end up helping not just global warming, but a lot of other problems that global warming will be reduced as a side effect.
Yeah, definitely another big question and hard to answer in just a couple of minutes. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. We are running short on time here, so I am going to move things along to our next guest speaker. Thank you again to both of you for your great answers and your great presentations tonight. We appreciate it. So our final speaker, before we get to our Rotary Club showcase presentations, is former Dryden Rotarian John Dove. John graduated in medicine from McGill, postgraduate training in family medicine and anesthesia at McMaster. He had a full-time practice in Dryden for 35 years and locum anesthesia practice for 10 years after. He took environmentally friendly to the next level when he lived off-grid using wind and solar from 2001 to 2012 and established a commercial solar project selling to grid in 2012. He's been driving hybrid vehicles since 2000 and purchased his first full electric vehicle in 2020, and I heard that he is driving a Tesla and loves it, so you'll hear maybe a little bit more about that. And I just have to say, my husband and I built our cottage ourselves, and we built it so it was completely off grid. So I'm especially excited to hear about your work on this topic, John. So please welcome John Dove.
Thank you. Now I have, in the interest of time, I have pre-recorded my presentation. I've sent a copy to Jarell, but I think I can run it from my laptop directly. So if you'll give me permission to share screen, we'll try that. My wife and I did a sound check this afternoon and we got the sound working, but if there's a problem, please stop me. Is that okay? Where's the black screen?
John, you're a host.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is John Dove. I am honored to be invited to speak at your Winnipeg West Rotary Conference entitled Preserving the Planet for Our Youth. My topic today is electric vehicles coming of age in a changing climate. And I will bring these 5 threads together: the evolution of EVs, electronics and energy management, development of energy storage, the environment.
John, we've lost your sound. Maybe get Jarell to run it from his end.
It could do 100 kilometers per hour for 100 kilometers.
You can go back. You lost the sound when you went.
It sounded like your sound was coming back now.
Well, but
Yeah, sorry, I put it on mute, but I guess it muted everything. Can I start from this slide?
No, yes, sure. That's great.
It was recharged by connecting cables to the high voltage overhead tram lines, obviously a safe procedure. The next significant advance came in 1959 with the development of the Henny kilowatt. This had lead acid batteries, DC drive. It could do 100 kilometers per hour for 100 kilometers, and obviously had no luggage room. But the significance of this experimental vehicle was that scientists and engineers at Caltech developed a speed controller, which employed diodes and relays in their attempt to improve efficiency. Transistorization began in 1959, and over the next 36 years, significant advances were made. The application of transistorization to the speed controller and further to an energy management system led directly to the development of modern EVs. And the first of these modern EVs was the 1996 EV1 developed by GM. This featured the advanced electronics, an induction charging system, DC to AC inverter, but still used lead-acid batteries. This vehicle was the subject of the documentary entitled "Who Killed the Electric Car?" Alan Cocconi left the GM project to found his own company called AC Propulsion, and in 1997 developed the T0, which used lead-acid batteries again, but 150 kilowatt capacity. He added AC induction drive, and this was a rocket. In 1996, however, after 100 years of development, lithium-ion batteries finally became commercially available. And the first mass-market EV to incorporate lithium-ion batteries was the Nissan Leaf in 1997. This has an efficiency of 5.85 kilometers per kilowatt now, and over 500,000 of these cars have been sold. In 1998, California engineer Martin Haberhart commissioned Cocconi to build a T0 using new lithium-ion batteries. The car cost $220,000, but they were sufficiently encouraged that in 2003, he and Cocconi and 3 others incorporated Tesla Motors. 2004, they attracted Elon Musk as investor, and Musk took over in 2008. Their first iteration of a commercial vehicle was the Model S, launched in 2012. This now has an efficiency of 6.52 kilometers per kilowatt. GM got back in the EV game with the Chevrolet Bolt with an efficiency of 6.3 kilometers per kilowatt, and this met the new car average price in 2017. This car continues to be built. In 2018, the Tesla Model 3 was unveiled with in the long-range version, 570 kilometers range, efficiency of 6.9 kilometers per kilowatt, and is now the world's best-selling battery electric vehicle. Well, environmental considerations have come to the fore. Reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 1990 and subsequent have left to the realization that a 2 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature is the point at which irreversible climate harm will have occurred. And this culminated in the Paris Agreement in 2015, where 195 countries resolved to limit global heating by decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. Where does Canada fit in this? Well, in 2016, this is an analysis of emissions per capita in tons of CO2 by province. The Canadian average is 20. Quebec is the low at 9.55 and a high of 71 in Saskatchewan. Manitoba, you'll see, averages 17 tons of CO2 per capita. And the Canadian average is shown on the dotted line for 2019. Worldwide CO2 emissions in terms of tons per year per capita. Canada is second highest in the world, above Saudi Arabia and below the other oil-producing countries of the Middle East. Looking at greenhouse gas emissions in Canada by economic sector, over the 29 years between 1990 and 2018, oil and gas emissions increased by 82% and transportation emissions went up by 54%. By contrast, emissions from heavy industry have dropped by 20% and emissions for electricity generation have dropped by 34%. To emphasize the impact, the Canada Energy Regulator has shown the demand for fuel consumption in Ontario in 2018. Of Ontario's total demand, 286,000 barrels per day was for motor gasoline. This translates to 45 million liters of gasoline, which translates to over 100,000 tons emitted per day from Ontario. So what can we do as individuals in the face of this huge national and global problem? Well, Saul Griffiths, a metallurgical engineer and energy analyst, who spent over a decade doing energy analysis in the US, has said the answer is electrify. And from our point of view, as individuals, stop using gasoline. But don't EVs have carbon footprints too? In an attempt to answer this, the Argonne National Laboratory developed the GREET framework, which is a greenhouse gases, regulated emissions, and energy use and technologies model, stating that to get a complete picture of the energy and environmental impacts of the technology, it's important to consider the full life cycle. So this slide comes from the US EPA, comparing an American electric vehicle with a 300-mile range to a gasoline car using the GREET analysis. This was produced in 2019, and it shows the emissions in grams per mile of the total vehicle. The blue bars represent the extraction of metals, manufacturing, assembly, and disposal. The orange bars represent electricity and gasoline production emissions, fuel transport, and tailpipe emissions from operation. And as you can see, the emissions in gram per mile over the life cycle are 35% lower for the electric vehicle than for the gasoline car. Now, this is with the US mix of electricity generation. And why is that important? Well, because 55% of electricity generation in the US comes from hydrocarbons, primarily coal. This from Clean Air Ontario shows the tons of CO2 equivalent per gigawatt hour produced for electricity generation. A coal-fired plant will produce over 1,000 tons to produce that much electricity. A windmill will produce the equivalent of 14 tons of CO2 per gigawatt hour. And all of the renewable energy modalities are less than 4% of the emissions of coal-fired generation. Natural gas is not much better than coal. It's basically at 60%. So, and consider that in terms of Manitoba. Manitoba's hydro produces 97% of the province's electricity, which is clearly renewable energy. Interestingly, the bulk of the other 3% comes from wind generation. So running that same electric vehicle in Manitoba would be a very low impact operation. Where do Manitoba's emissions come from? Well, there are the usual culprits from buildings and from manufacturing, but there are two large sources of emissions, agriculture and transportation. And of these two large sources, altering the emissions from transportation is the easiest and fastest thing to do. Now, this is from our experience with the EV and the questions we are most frequently asked. And the first thing that puzzles people is, where can I charge it? In fact, every electric vehicle comes with a level 1 charging cable. And what that means is a 120 volt plug that goes into a standard receptacle, and it will provide 3 to 6 kilometers per hour. So you could plug in at home, or you can in fact plug into the block heater pylon at work. The next step up is a level 2 charger, 240 volts, and this will provide 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. On the left is shown a level 2 charger at home, and on the right is shown a level 2 charger, the so-called destination charger at a hotel, which many hotels are starting to do. The level 3 chargers are the high-speed chargers. As an example, on the left is the Petro-Canada Electric Highway. They can provide up to 350 kilowatts of electricity. The standard Tesla high-speed chargers, level 3, are 250 kilowatts, and they can provide between 500 and 1,000 kilometers per hour charging time. And these are located from North Sydney, Nova Scotia to Victoria at about 178 kilometers spacing. How far can it go on a charge? Well, the lowest of the EVs now provides 300 kilometers range, up to 600 is standard. We have found when traveling, we should plan the trip to use the fast chargers and then seek a destination charger in a hotel at night. We traveled 7,300 kilometers in December from Dryden to Vancouver Island. We found that charging added about 3 hours to our driving time going from Dryden to Vancouver, and this was at minus 30 below. Are there enough chargers? The answer is yes, especially in cities and along major highways. They are less frequent in the country, and that's a little more problematic. And the federal government has provided from 2019 $130 million over 5 years to support the zero emission vehicle penetration targets of 100% by focusing on level 2 charging in workplaces, commercial and multi-unit residential buildings, public places, on-street, and fleet projects such as taxis. How do I find a charging station when I travel? Every electric vehicle has an app included which shows the manufacturer's proprietary chargers, and we strongly suggest downloading one of a number of free online apps. We make great use of Charge Hub and Plug Share. There's also Flow when one is going east through Quebec, Ivy in Ontario, and Petro-Canada app covers all of their stations in the country. What's it like in winter? Actually, it's the best car we've ever owned in the winter. There are no starting issues. It is warm and defrosted within 3 minutes. Think electric hairdryer. It has excellent handling because of the very low center of gravity. The battery bank is located under the passenger compartment. Electricity consumption, as mentioned, like fuel consumption, increases in the deep cold, so more frequent charging is needed. Finding what routine maintenance is required. Obviously, software updates, because these are highly electronic. These are in our vehicle are downloaded automatically every couple of weeks. Tire maintenance has to be done, of course, with winter tires, and replacing the cabin air filter and checking the brakes every 2 years is recommended. And in conclusion, well, I strongly believe that we have obligations as citizens to decrease our carbon emissions. Second, charging networks are maturing, so many more chargers are available, and with home charging for commuting, essentially charging is a non-issue. Third, EVs have evolved with vehicle ranges of 300 to 600 kilometers, and advanced control, handling, and comfort systems come as standard in these vehicles. And finally, they have the lowest cost of operation and maintenance. In Manitoba, 1 kilowatt of electricity costs 9.3 cents, with the average EV efficiency of 6 kilometers per kilowatt. For $2 equivalent of a liter of gasoline, one can drive about 128 kilometers. Thank you. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much, John, for that presentation. That was fantastic. And I think you could be an electric vehicle salesman based on that presentation. Just got to check out the local Tesla dealership and maybe you can get a job there. I did have a question from Fred Wright come in. He would like to know, what is your opinion on plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, PHEVs?
I forget which number slide it was back there, but did you remember the stop sign? Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles use gasoline. A plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, in my opinion, was a good solution in 1997 when the Toyota Prius came out. But Nissan had more forethought and brought out a full battery electric vehicle. Now that has required some evolution, but over the 20 years, I think now plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are outdated. We had one. Our last car in 2016 was one, because we live 360 kilometers from Winnipeg, and there didn't seem to make much sense to buy a car we couldn't drive home, you know, because the range was so small. These the changes in these vehicles are what's the word? Not just incremental. It's geometric, I suppose, is the right the right-sided way to say it. The ranges are increasing, battery technology is increasing. They are extremely simple vehicles. A plug-in hybrid is the more complicated vehicle. The battery vehicle has a couple of electric motors in its drivetrain, the induction converters, etc., and the battery. As opposed to an internal combustion engine, it has about 90% fewer parts in a battery electric vehicle. The plug-in hybrid electric vehicle has the internal combustion engine plus the battery electric vehicle. And it still burns gasoline, which isn't solving our climate problem.
No, not 100% anyway, kind of partly there. It's a part solution, but not the full solution. There are a number of questions coming in, and I do apologize. That question was not from Fred Wright. It was from Jarrell. Must be getting tired. So the next question was, are any EVs all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive?
Yes, e-wheel drives, most EVs come as either front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. In fact, pretty well the whole Tesla range is all-wheel drive. The new Mustang Mach-E that has come out comes in either all-wheel drive version or rear-wheel drive version. I know that because my son has just ordered one. Yeah, so all-wheel drive is actually the standard for most of them.
Okay. There are a number of questions, so I apologize to everybody who's asking questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. But one question I think probably everybody does kind of have on their mind is, what is the price range of these vehicles looking at? How much of investment are we looking at here for us?
There are if you go to the Department of Transport website for Canada and look them up, you will see what the new vehicle costs are. There are rebates, not so much obviously in Ontario or Manitoba, but in BC and Quebec there are rebates. And I think the peak cost of the rebate is up to $65,000. So there are many now EVs coming out at under that range. The GM Bolt, and whether it's subsidized or not, I don't know, but it has maintained its position as the new car average. So that's in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. The new Mach-E is in the $50,000 range. The Tesla, the low range Model 3 is in that range, 50 to 55,000. The Nissan Leaf is under 50,000, and that range has gone up to 360 kilometers. So as costs come down with mass production, with technology evolving, and of course, don't forget in all of this the cost of maintenance. There are no oil changes. There's no routine take it to the dealer for this, that, or something else. It doesn't happen. We have 30,000 kilometers on our vehicle, and the only repair we have had done was one of the parking cameras went. So the Tesla mechanic came over to our son's house in Montreal when we were there and replaced the camera in 15 minutes. That's been the sum total of maintenance we've had in 30,000 kilometers in almost 2 years.
Yeah, so looking at those price ranges, I'm thinking that some of our gas guzzling vehicles that we're all driving today have cost way more actually than that. So to me, it sounds like a pretty good investment. You're selling me, John. Come up with a Tesla truck, which I'm sure they're actively working on those vehicles as well, and I think I might be sold. Okay, very good. Thank you again, John, for your presentation. So many questions coming in. I think maybe, John, if you want to, is it possible that John can even answer some of these questions directly? John, are you seeing some of those Q&As coming in?
Yeah, he should be able to go into the Q&A.
Perfect. So maybe, John, if you want to go ahead and start directly answering those individuals, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, thank you, everybody, for your questions coming in and the chats. I'm seeing comments of thank you for the excellent presentations. That was from Lauren Calvert. So we do appreciate your time here today, to all of our guest speakers. We are going to take a quick 5-minute break. I want to be completely honest with everybody here tonight. We've had some technical issues, and that has run us a little bit behind schedule. So
all this yummy snacks.
This is bread and butter with jam later. Kids love it. We eat an apple. And also my apple. Look at it. Thank you, Breakfast Club. This program is so amazing. It helps a lot. Especially those kids that need food. This will help them so much. So once again, thank you, Breakfast Club. And then this is how I cut them. And this is for room 8.
In room 11, the kids love the breakfast program and it is healthy and yummy.
In room 15, kids will love this breakfast. We have toast, apple, and strawberry jam. Thank you.
What are you having today? Cereal. Did you like it? Wow. Hello. What are you having today?
Cereal.
Cereal. Wow, you're lucky, right? You're having breakfast. Did you want to say thank you to Breakfast Club? Say thank you.
Thank you.
I like the breakfast
Whatever you wanted today. What do you
because
like? What were we doing?
it makes me have energy
You ready?
when
What
you
are
have
you
activities
eating?
inside the classroom.
Thank you, Breakfast Program, because I hope there's more food, because food makes energy, so we can have more energies, so we can run and play.
Okay, hello. Thank you for coming today. It's great to see Rotary host a conference focused on the environment because it is such an important issue that will only become more important in the coming years. My name is Jaden, and I'm the current co-president of the Student Rotary Club at the University of Manitoba. Today, we'll be sharing our perspectives on the environment and some information about different topics as presented by our Rotary Club members. I'd like to start off by thanking Greg Hammond for inviting our club to present at this conference. We're very grateful for this opportunity and platform to share our perspectives today. So to start off with, here's a brief overview of what our presentation will be covering. We'll begin with a short introduction of our club, and then each of us will give a brief talk about an environmental topic that we think is important. Then we'll wrap up the presentation with what we can do moving forwards. So we are the Student Rotary Club, abbreviated SRC, and we are based at the University of Manitoba. We are a student-led club and thus are very understanding of our members' availabilities and academic commitments. Our goal is to bring together like-minded individuals with the purpose of making an impact to improve our local community as well as the world. Our club is a very tight-knit group Our members are given the opportunity to build connections and friendship both within the club as well as with the Rotarians that support our club. With COVID, we haven't been able to do as much in-person volunteering and fundraising as we normally would. However, with restrictions lifting, we have been able to volunteer at organizations such as Slow Mission, Oak Table, and Harvest Manitoba to help prepare food and sort donations. We used to hold bake sales and breakfasts to fundraise, but this year we organized an online raffle to raise funds for the Thousand Survival Gardens project, as well as Oak Table. I know a lot of Rotarians are very supportive of this fundraiser, and we really appreciate both the Rotarian support as well as the businesses that were generous enough to donate the basket items to us.
Hi there, my name is Wei-Ann, and today I will be introducing the topic of Indigenous plants. So Indigenous plants include any plants that have adapted to be highly tolerant of the soil, temperature, nutrient, and precipitation conditions that they naturally occur in. For example, in Manitoba, the Indigenous plants continue to survive despite crazy cold and frost conditions, as well as moisture stress. One benefit of Indigenous plants is the reduced resource consumption, such as reduced need for water, fertilizers, pesticides, and maintenance. They really don't need to be taken care of as they are quite self-sustaining. For example, compared to grass, they require less water and also increase biodiversity, as their nectar serves as a food source for many organisms, while also acting as habitats for different wildlife. Furthermore, they are very aesthetically pleasing. They add beauty to the environment, and they also simultaneously filter pollutants from the air, which contributes to a cleaner environment and increased well-being. In addition, Indigenous plants have a cultural asset as they are used for food, medicine, clothing, and traditional and ceremonial uses. For example, the plant displayed on the slide here is yarrow, which is a perennial flower found in North America, which is used by Cree peoples to alleviate headaches and stop nosebleeds. The Cree, Dene, and Métis peoples also use yarrow for bee stings, burns, and cuts. Yarrow is super adaptable as it grows in basically any soil, while at the same time improving areas of poor soil. It can thrive in disturbed areas and is drought resistant, while also providing attractive nectar and pollen for several different types of insects. So moving forward, we suggest that you research different Indigenous plants to your region and consider adding Indigenous plants to your homes and gardens, and potentially replacing grass.
Hi, I'm Zahin Rahman. I'll be talking about old growth forests. So what are old growth forests? Old growth forests are forests that has been existing for a long time. They consist of the ancient trees, and these forests has been in shape for many years under the guidance of the nature. They are also known as primary forests, mature forests, or virgin forests. Their ecosystems consist of native species and lack signs of damaging human activities. And now an estimated of 1.1 billion hectares of old growth forests are left on Earth. So, why is it important? There have fallen and decaying trees that are very tall and with more established root structures. These help shape the local environment, providing a variety of habitats, greater access to some important nutrients, greater soil drainage generation, and many other benefits. They're exceptionally rich in biodiversity. All this helps in the survival of more varieties of organisms in the area. We know trees are really good storage units for carbon. So they're a giant bank account of carbon. They hold about 30 to 70% more carbon than any other forest does. They play a vital role in fighting the global warming. We can even talk about the logging in British Columbia, which is the third largest province of Canada with 60% of its lands as forests. Got big businesses regarding cutting down trees due to its extensive forest coverage and produces wood products or logging. It is causing heat waves all over in Canada. These old growth forests help provide atmospheric moisture, which helps create clouds, which then reflects the sun heat. So cutting down the forest leaves with no protection from the heat caused by the global warming. So the environment becomes more disastrous with logging and global warming combined. So what can we do about it? So we can help to stop cutting down these natural protectors of ours by raising our voices and spreading awareness among everyone. We can have meetings and discussions with government representatives and the higher authorities, being a group, being a team, and can help in keeping all our old forests safe and in peace. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nardine Solomon. I'm going to talk about sustainable farming today. So first, I want to start with defining unsustainable farming. So unsustainable farming means depleting resources faster than they can be replaced or replenished by the earth. And so industrialized farming does that very often. Industrialized farming has many practices that can get us the highest crop yield and for the lowest cost, but can also pollute the environment and are overall just unsustainable for future generations. They hurt water, they hurt our health, they hurt our air and our soil. And just a few brief examples. So for hurting our health, they sometimes give excessive antibiotics to cattle, and that can cause antibiotic resistance and ultimately affect everyone's health. For hurting our water, this is a picture on the top right over here. This is a picture of Lake Winnipeg. So this is a very big problem that we have locally here in Winnipeg. And this is a picture from the Lake Winnipeg Foundation, which is a great company. I think you should support them. And this has occurred because industrialized farming producers have put too much fertilizers in their fields, causing algal blooms in nearby water bodies, and these algal blooms can cause eutrophication and kill a lot of the life that is in these waters. So let's talk about sustainable farming and how they put their efforts towards considering existing and future generations. And what I mean by that is that they do not deplete resources faster than they can be replaced or replenished by the earth. And this will give us a chance at solving food insecurity in the future. So how can we help people who may not be farmers? I'm assuming most of us are not farmers. There's a lot of things that we can do to help. So for example, we can eat less red meat. And this will allow us to have less of a demand for raising cattle in unsustainable ways. And these unsustainable ways, they cause a lot of greenhouse gases and destroy forests to turn them into grazing land. So by lowering our demand, we're lowering the need to do these things. We can also buy sustainably produced foods. And this can sometimes be tricky because these foods are oftentimes more expensive, and we might not actually know which foods are sustainable or not just by looking at the labels. But rest assured that the more we buy these kinds of foods, the cheaper they will be, and the more we will be able to incentivize unsustainable producers to become more sustainable and change their approach. You can also do things in your community. So for example, you can reach out to your policymakers, or if you are a policymaker, how can you invest in sustainable farms or level the playing field so that sustainable farms are able to compete with industrialized farms? And if you're an educator or wherever your place of work is, how can you promote sustainable farming in your place of work? For example, in high school, I remember we would have so many opportunities such as Envirothon or Bioinnovation Week that would allow us to think outside of the box to come up with solutions to these problems. And we would have guests to talk about farmers who would talk about ways that we can become more sustainable. And at the end of the day, these ideas may seem out of reach or out of our control, but the more each of us acts towards sustainable farming, the more we influence the people around us and the more we can help our community become more sustainable.
Hello, I'll be talking a little bit about ocean waste. Cruise ships in particular have been described as a monument to decadence and gluttony, or for most of the population, porta potty with swimming pools. Ships all around the world are growing in size and quantity while we're here killing off their natural predators, the iceberg. These floating resorts are doing more to destroy our climate than all of the world's cars combined, at an average of 4.6 billion tons of extra CO2. CO2 gets the most attention, but there are other substances that are so much more damaging to the environment and to human life that they are not even allowed on land vehicles. And that is the picture you see here. Heavy fuel, a residual product that's left over after gasoline and diesel have been produced. It has a very high sulfur content and is cost effective. But this has led to its use in fuel-hungry shipping engines. These huge engines burn 12,000 liters an hour. That's almost 300,000 liters a day. That's enough fuel for you to leave your car on idle for 55 years. And it's not regular gas or diesel, but some of the most foul and damaging fuel in existence. To give you an idea of just how bad this is, consider the requirements for even docking near a port. They must switch to different fuels or use abatement technologies that reduce their fuel usage. Even then, citizens living near cruise ports like Southampton have seen their environments become more and more toxic each year. The wind blows the pollution over the entire city, which has led to increases in respiratory diseases and cancer. The cruise companies do not monitor their emissions and their effect on the area. A single docked cruise liner burns so much fuel a day that the sulfur content and the particulate emissions alone is equivalent to thousands of buses. Southampton is Britain's busiest cruise terminal and can have 5 of these ships in harbor at one time. It is one of the few cities cited by the World Health Organization as breaching air quality guidelines, even with no sector of industrial manufacturing nearby. Efforts to control this environmental and human impact have failed due to the pushback from rich cruise companies flying flags of convenience. When in international waters, there's nothing stopping them from dumping all of this sewage directly into the ocean, along with the toxic byproducts that are referred to as emission cheat systems. These are designed to wash and scrub pollutants from cheap fuel, which is then dumped into the ocean to avoid disposal fees. We have only recently been able to track this with modern satellites, but there's still no way to hold any of these ships accountable. These standard practices and unregulated output of sulfur and nitrogen oxide contribute greatly to the destruction of marine ecosystems. It suffocates marine animals and bleaches coral reefs. Furthermore, when the sulfur mixes with the water and air, it forms sulfuric acid and rains down on not only the ocean, but the cities and forests as well. This contributes a lot to health problems and deforestation. The industry is resilient against agreements such as the Paris Accord. The whole cruise ship industry is wildly unnecessary. It's a monument to decadence and gluttony in the face of tremendous damage to the climate, endangered ecosystems, and human health. This next image shows you how flying flags of convenience are used to violate international law. When in international waters, any ship can be registered to a country that has lax regulations to avoid taxes, rights, environmental regulations, and even laws against crime. It is similar to registering your car's number plate in a different province or state to pay lower insurance fees, but at a much larger scale. I highly recommend checking out The Real Cost of Cruises on Patriot Act with Hassan Minaj to learn more about this topic. Other ships used for commercial fishing are also harmful. Fishing gear such as nets, lines, and traps are one of the biggest sources of plastic in the ocean and has contributed to a global decline in fishing stocks. Fisheries and Oceans Canada is a Canadian federal institution responsible for safeguarding our waters and managing Canada's fisheries and ocean resources. It helps to ensure healthy and sustainable aquatic ecosystems through habitat protection and sound science. It's also one of the few institutions globally to recognize this impact.
Okay, so now that we've told you about these topics and issues, you might be thinking to yourself, what can I do now? While it may be daunting to be faced with the task where individual efforts may only be a mere drop in the bucket, it'll take our collective efforts to bring about some real change. Some things you can do include sending a letter to your member of parliament or government representative. They're there to act as your voice, so take advantage of that to voice your concerns. Educate yourself by looking up the topics we have discussed today, as well as any others that might seem interesting or important to you. Stay up to date with the news, or even bring up some issues the news stations failing to publicize and spread awareness. You can also be an informed voter. Democracy works best if people are out there voting and making informed decisions. When looking up candidates' platforms, take a look at their environmental stances to see their proposals for sustainable policies. Vote for someone who promises to take meaningful action and change towards protecting the environment. You can also be a responsible consumer. Support businesses and purchase products that have a public commitment to sustainability. If you look it up, it's very likely that someone else has already done the research for you into their practices. While it may be difficult to hold big corporations accountable for their emissions, you can speak with through your purchasing decisions. Use sustainable transportation. Now that the weather is warming up, it's much more appealing to bike or even take a walk. Take advantage of that when it's feasible, as will be both beneficial for the environment as well as your own physical health and well-being. Take advantage of bike sharing programs as well, and encourage the government to make it more widely known and funded so that people can take advantage of this program. You can also use public transport or carpool. This will reduce the amount of traffic on the street and gas emissions released per commuter, as well as save you money. So thanks for listening. Together, we can work towards ensuring that the future generations are in good hands. You can find us at the following, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us by email at s.rotaractclub@gmail.com. Thanks.